What's going on, everybody? Welcome back. Gerald here with your weather forecast. So we're all having a great Thursday so far, but it's definitely one of those Thursdays that you're gonna want to be careful out there, especially out in the south central plains where we already have some severe thunderstorms firing off, and these will continue to organize through the evening before eventually continuing to work eastbound and even having another day of those severe storms tomorrow, then followed up by some snow in the Midwest and the Northeast. So I'm gonna break that down for you in this video. I'm gonna go region by region, tell you about all those threats and the timing with them for your location. But if you are new here, welcome. Just to introduce myself a little bit, my name is Gerald. I'm a meteorology student at the University of North Carolina, Charlotte, and welcome to the channel. This is kind of what we do. What you see in this video is what you can expect throughout much of my channel, although also with some storm chasing mixed in there every now and then. And speaking of that, I did want to let you know I'm not going to have a video tomorrow because I will actually be out storm chasing here somewhere in the Carolinas, Georgia, Tennessee kind of vicinity, and I'll tell you why that is as I show you in this video that threat of storms that'll move through that region going into tomorrow. So just want to remind you now ahead of time that I won't have a video out, but I am hoping to do some vlogging, and hopefully I'll kind of put all that together and make a video out of it that I'll try to post sometime later this weekend. But with all that said, let's go ahead and get right into it because we do have a lot to discuss on this Thursday. So taking a look at radar out there, you can see some of these storms already firing up here over Texas, as well as a pretty big shield of rain here over the southeast from kind of the Carolinas down through Georgia, Alabama, Mississippi. And that is going to continue to lift northward through the next couple of hours or so, and I'll show you that here in the future cast. But did want to zoom in on some of these storms here, and these are the storms that we're worried about. You can see some of these storms just to the northwest of Dallas, Fort Worth, and then even back towards the Abilene area with some severe storms working their way through. And as we go through the overnight, these are all going to push further off to the east and the north, and of course we'll take a look at that here in a second. But taking a look at satellite, you can tell here, this is that low pressure system we've been worried about diving out of kind of New Mexico now getting into Texas, and with that is feeding into this warm Gulf air that is advecting northward, and with the combination of that wind from the low pressure and that springtime air being brought up by the Gulf, that is a recipe for trouble here in this part of the country, and that is really going to get going over the next couple of hours. Taking a look here at our current hazards, though, you can see we do have a severe thunderstorm watch currently at the time of recording this here over Texas, and I would expect through tonight this to continue to be added further to the east and maybe even likely becoming tornado watches in a couple of places. And then tomorrow as well, we expect those severe storms back further to the east. But other than all that, we have a big area of kind of flood watches and flash flood watches here along the Ohio River from kind of Ohio all the way back down to southeastern Oklahoma. And then that is surrounded by all these brown colors here indicating high winds are expected over the next 24 to 48 hours because of this storm system. Then up north into the northeast, we have some winter weather advisories, winter storm warnings for some snow that we're expecting. And that does extend all the way back down through Detroit and into Chicago, as well as Gary, Indiana, for some of that snow we're also expecting out of this storm system. So taking a look at kind of an overview here of this entire thing to show you that. Again, this is really going to go in as we go into tonight. You can see this big area of storms developing over Texas, Louisiana, Arkansas, and into Mississippi, and that's going to continue into the overnight tonight, eventually kind of pushing up towards the Memphis and Little Rock area, and also a lot of heavy rain on the north side of this. So it's going to be heavy rain on the north side, but in this kind of circle that you see kind of formed here, that is the warm sector, and that's where we're going to get these severe storms to fire. So anywhere south of this kind of rain shield and to the east of this kind of leading front is our kind of warm sector, and that's where we expect to see those strong storms. So you'll see that kind of continue to evolve as we go through the overnight. But eventually, as we get into tomorrow afternoon, that's whenever we're going to be dealing with some of these strong to severe storms through Kentucky, down towards Nashville, even back towards Atlanta, and then that will eventually continue to move to the east and north through tomorrow afternoon. But we'll also get some snow here on the north side of this through sections of the Midwest and the Great Lakes before eventually that snow transitions up into New England going into tomorrow night. And luckily, by the time we get into tomorrow night, I think we'll be pretty much done with the severe threat. But then, of course, that's whenever this kind of wintry threat begins to increase from places like Detroit back over towards upstate New York and into New England, from Boston up through New Hampshire, Vermont, and into Maine during the overnight Friday and even into Saturday afternoon before this system kind of finally begins to pull out going into Sunday afternoon. And Sunday afternoon, we expect much nicer weather across pretty much the entire lower 48, but especially those of us east of the Mississippi having much nicer weather going into Sunday. So taking a look at this severe threat, this is for tonight. You can see we have a moderate risk, which don't let the name moderate fool you. This is the second highest possible risk that the Storm Prediction Center can issue. And this goes all the way from Dallas-Fort Worth back towards areas to the north of Shreveport and south of Little Rock. But even the slight risk encompasses a big area from Houston to Jackson, Mississippi, up towards the Memphis area, and then all the way back, like we talked about, towards Abilene. So these storms will begin to fire in this general area and then through the overnight work this general direction. But again, we do expect the height of that to be in kind of this red shaded area here over the Dallas kind of area and points to the east. And then tomorrow, this begins to shift further to the east, and we have an enhanced risk already here from kind of Lexington, Kentucky, back down towards Nashville. And I wouldn't be surprised tomorrow to see maybe this kind of enhanced risk look a little bit more like this in orientation. But we have a lot of uncertainty with certain kind of things through here, and we'll talk about that a little bit more as we go into future radar through this area, but definitely a lot of question marks with some of this severe weather tomorrow, but nonetheless, we already do have that enhanced risk, and that's where we have the highest confidence right now in seeing that severe weather from Nashville up towards Lexington, Kentucky. So we'll go ahead and start breaking this down in Futurecast, and you can see right now, we are really already kind of dealing with this line of storms right now out into Texas and these other storms firing out in front of it. And this is all going to continue to move east through the overnight tonight. So swinging through Dallas, then eventually getting into Little Rock with some of these strong storms and thunder, and then even into Shreveport, Louisiana as we get further into the overnight. So, again, really, it's just going to be kind of anywhere within that threat bubble that we talked about can see some of these strong storms overnight tonight. But I will say, this is about sunrise tomorrow. You can see most of Texas is in the clear. Most of Louisiana is in the clear. But we do still have sections of northeastern Arkansas and into kind of Tennessee still dealing with some of this threat. But luckily, we will lose a lot of our instability by then. So that will help limit some of the threat in those places further to the east with this line, but you have to really be careful with anything that forms in front of this line. So to kind of show that to you, these kind of areas that you see or these clusters of storms firing out in this warm sector that we talked about, that's where you're going to want to watch out for more of that discrete tornado threat into the overnight. So it's one of those nights you want to have your weather radio on. You want to have a way to get those warnings because I can just about guarantee you we're probably going to get tornado warnings after the sun goes down tonight in this part of the country. But again, as we have talked about recently, going into tomorrow afternoon, I do expect kind of this general area to really clear out, and we'll have a much better Saturday for sure here in the southern plains. So taking a look at those tornado parameters or those ingredients for tornadoes, you can see that really begins to increase going into the overnight here into southern Arkansas and into northern Louisiana. And those ingredients will continue to shift off to the north and east, although then beginning to kind of get smaller as we go into the overnight as we lose some of that instability. But something that will be a big deal out here is a lot of hail. I'll tell you, especially back here towards Texas and Oklahoma, a lot of these storms are going to pack a lot of hail in them. So that's something you're really going to be careful or going to want to be careful about whether you see tornado warnings or not. So let's move this up into tomorrow. The next place that I think will have the best shot of seeing this threat will be up here into the Ohio and Tennessee river valleys. And he said really is going to start tomorrow morning. This warm front here that you can kind of see depicted by this big batch of rain to the north of it is going to begin to lift northward. So anywhere to the south of that in this warm sector is going to have the threat of severe storms tomorrow. And you can see tomorrow afternoon is whenever this really gets going. Look at this line of really kind of individual cells firing back here into Tennessee. And those are going to be able to organize pretty quickly with ample wind shear. The main question will be kind of if they fire at all here in the southern areas. That's the question there. And then in the northern areas, the question is, will we have enough instability for these storms to feed on? So you can see with the latest HERT, as we go through tomorrow afternoon, it's really depicting quite a dangerous day here into sections of Kentucky and Tennessee. But even as we go closer towards sunset tomorrow, look at these storms and these cells firing off here in eastern Tennessee, northeastern Georgia, and then this continues to move further to the east into upstate South Carolina and northern Georgia down here, seeing these lines of storms move through. And these are very discreet looking. So I think tomorrow we'll probably get some pretty crazy pictures, I think, from somewhere in this general area. Some discrete cells that will likely have the ability to rotate and potentially produce tornadoes, damaging winds, and even hail, as far south here as northern Georgia and upstate South Carolina. But right now, again, we do have that highest risk up here into Kentucky and Tennessee, where we're just a lot more confident that the ingredients will come together. But I'll tell you, tomorrow when I'm storm chasing, I'll likely be down here into this kind of area of upstate South Carolina, northeastern Georgia. A lot of times we kind of get some enhancement from the escarpment here whenever these storms ride up along it. Sometimes they just like to spin a little bit more. I probably couldn't really tell you why, but it's just something I've kind of learned growing up here that we see a lot of the time. So nonetheless, if you're in that slight risk that we looked at, be careful tomorrow. And of course, we'll get an update on that tonight. But even these storms are going to continue to push even into West Virginia and Virginia going after sunset tomorrow, although definitely beginning to weaken as we get further into tomorrow evening. Something I do also need to mention on this map is the snow, although we'll look at it again on the next map as we look at the Midwest. But tomorrow afternoon, expect some snow to start falling here in those areas that have that winter storm watch that we talked about here up into northern Indiana, western Illinois, and then into Michigan we'll look at here in a second. But in terms of when this will all clear out, I think we'll really begin to clear out into the overnight Friday, and then by the time we get into Saturday, much nicer weather through this section of the country. So taking a look at those tornado ingredients through this part of the country, you can see we get a bit of a lull going into tomorrow morning just because we lack some of that instability. But as we get into tomorrow afternoon, look at these ingredients for tornadoes firing up here in this sector of storms. So the main reason we have this enhanced risk up here and not down here to the south is because, again, we know that we're going to get storms to fire here just because it's closer to that low pressure, so we'll have that forcing. But the ingredients down here to the south into Georgia and into upstate South Carolina and western North Carolina are plenty good enough for these storms to rotate. We just don't know really if they're going to fire at all. So you can see, I mean, look at some of these numbers getting up into upstate South Carolina tomorrow. Once you start seeing those purples, that gets dangerous. So we're definitely going to want to watch that for certain going into tomorrow evening. All right, so taking a look here now at the Midwest, where we aren't really expecting much severe weather here, but definitely some snow through the region. You can see that rain will begin to move in going into tomorrow afternoon, but quickly transition to some heavy wet snow here into southern Michigan, northern Indiana, western Illinois. And you can see that snow will continue to fall through tomorrow afternoon and into tomorrow evening up towards the Detroit area and into other parts of Michigan. So looking at snow totals there, just because there's not really too much to talk about, just snow is going to start falling sometime tomorrow afternoon and begin to taper off east to west through tomorrow evening. But totals as a whole, I think 1 to 3 inches is a pretty safe bet here in northern Illinois and northern Indiana. But once you start getting up here into Michigan, I think 3 to 5 inches is a bit more of a realistic total, maybe some 5 to 8 inch totals kind of mixed in there here into central Michigan, but overall 3 to 5 is a pretty safe bet, I think, through much of Michigan. So taking a look at the Northeast now, a pretty nice day tomorrow for most of us, but as we get into tomorrow evening, this big old blob of precipitation is going to move up into New England and into the Northeast, and some of that's going to fall as snow for a lot of us, but also just some good old-fashioned heavy rain for others as well. So kind of areas from New York City south towards Philadelphia, back towards D.C., Baltimore, looks like heavy rain, but places up towards Boston and north of there into upstate New York, Vermont, New Hampshire, Maine, going into tomorrow night. This looks like some good old-fashioned heavy wet snow, so that will continue through the overnight Saturday and continuing to fall through much of Saturday morning and even afternoon for a lot of us in New England. Just the biggest question here will be temperatures, just because a lot of them will be very marginal here. So I'm talking 33, 34 degrees, which just makes it kind of difficult for the snow to stick. Because of that, some of our totals could get a little iffy here in the areas further south, but I think we're going to have a pretty big swath of half a foot to a foot of snow here in upstate New York, much of Vermont, New Hampshire, and kind of the northern tier of Massachusetts here. Areas further to the south here, I think you start as some snow, maybe change over to rain, but even if you do stay snow most of the time, that's where we're going to have some of those marginal temperatures, so more of a 1 to 3 inch event, I think, there for Boston, down into Hartford and Providence, and that kind of general stretch there into southern New England. So other than all this, there's going to be a lot of rain that falls. So I do want to show this to you here. Most of that I do expect in this kind of red area here along kind of the Mississippi and Ohio River valleys, where we could get 1 to 3 inches of rain. Isolated places getting more than that here through Arkansas potentially. So that's why we have some of those flash flood watches here in these areas, is because we're going to get a ton of rain within a relatively short amount of time. And then also maybe a bit more rain here along the escarpment, just where I think we'll get some of that lift with some of those storms that move through tomorrow, and we'll definitely watch for that. So looking long range here, for those spring lovers out there that have really enjoyed the past couple weeks, we're going to get a bit of a rude awakening here past a week out. So I think going into late next week and into next weekend, we got a whole lot of blue on this map, signaling colder than average temperatures. One thing I will mention is we are getting kind of into March here, so this won't be, kind of like that dangerous cold that you might get if we were to see this map sometime in January, but nonetheless colder than average temperatures, and combined with that, kind of more precipitation for much of the country here, especially into the southeast and west. So it looks kind of like a bit of a gloomy stretch here through the middle of March, and we'll definitely watch the trends on that. But with all that said, again, just make sure you're staying safe tonight. Make sure you have a way to get those warnings. And once again, just to remind you, I won't have a video out tomorrow because I will be out storm chasing. But I can promise you I'll post plenty of that on Twitter. So you can always find me on Twitter here with this, or there's a link here in the banner or in the description of this video. But with all that said, hope you all have a great rest of your Thursday. Stay safe out there, and I will see you all on Saturday.